President Joe Biden delivered his final speech at the United Nations General Assembly, or in front of the UN General Assembly, I should say. And this will be the final time he'll address this group of representatives of countries across the globe. And I do want to discuss clips from his speech. But first, while we dive into this, remember this from Trump's, one of his addresses in front of the UN General Assembly?
Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, world leaders, ambassadors, and distinguished delegates. 1 year ago, I stood before you for the first time in this grand hall. I addressed the threats facing our world, and I presented a vision to achieve a brighter future for all of humanity. Today, I stand before the United Nations General Assembly to share the extraordinary progress we've made. In less than 2 years, my administration has accomplished more than almost any administration in the history of our country. America's so true. Didn't expect that reaction, but that's okay.
Yeah, so literally laughed at when he tries to say that his administration has accomplished more than potentially any in the history of the United States. Laughed at by the world's countries' representatives. And so keep that in mind. And then keep in mind, and this is what I think is so devastating for Trump, is the contrast between Biden standing in front of the world and, among other important points, saying, I have chosen to set aside my ambition for power. I have chosen to set aside my love for being president for the sake of democracy. And thus, something in the interest of American democracy is in the interest of the world. One decision, a huge one, but one decision that Biden made, showing higher character than all of the decisions Trump ever made in his life. And that is one of the reasons that Trump should feel ashamed by Biden's character here.
I made the preservation of democracy the central cause of my presidency. This summer, I faced a decision whether to seek a second term as president. It was a difficult decision. Being president has been the honor of my life. There's so much more I want to get done. As much as I love the job, I love my country more. I decided after 50 years of public service, it's time for a new generation of leadership to take my nation forward. My fellow leaders, let us never forget, some things are more important than staying in power. It's your people.
Imagine how powerful that is. Saying it in front of some countries that have a very different approach to power than we do, that don't allow for the say of the people as much as we do. We'll be right back to the video just really quickly. If you're not already, I would appreciate you clicking that subscribe button. We are really close to 1 million subscribers. You can help us get there. Easy, free way. And then we do have merch at lukebeasleymerch.com with Harris as a promo code. You can get free shipping. Super cool election themed merch. Check it out. Back to the video. And then one of the reasons that Biden decided to do this was the new generation of leadership, and also to defeat Trump, to make sure the Democratic ticket defeated Trump in the interest of our country, in the interest of the world. And that's something that he even had to consider because of Trump insisting, because of his own ambition for power, not for the well-being of Americans, insisting on staying in our political world. Someone who's brought so much division, hatred, instability to our political situation, something that stresses out the entire world. And he could never imagine giving up power willingly, which is why he engaged in allegedly illegal activities to hold on to it at the end of his presidency. Whereas Biden is voluntarily, not even going into the election, handing off power. Getting to other moments from the speech, this is what you call presidential, which is contrasted against the disaster that is Trump. And he said this as well.
We need to end the era of war that began on 9/11. As Vice President to President Obama, he asked me to work to wind down the military operations in Iraq. And we did, painful as it was. When I came to office as president, Afghanistan had replaced Vietnam as America's longest war. I was determined to end it, and I did. It was a hard decision, but the right decision. 4 American presidents had faced that decision, but I was determined not to leave it to the 5th. It was a decision accompanied by tragedy. 13 brave Americans lost their lives, along with hundreds of Afghans in a suicide bomb. I think those lost lives, I think of them every day. I think of all the 2,461 U.S. military deaths over a long 20 years of that war. 20,744 American servicemen wounded in action. I think of their service, their sacrifice, and their heroism. I know other countries lost their own men and women fighting alongside us. We honor their sacrifices as well.
So they're reflecting on what was one of the most significant and, as we discuss the political fallout, politically damaging decisions that Biden made throughout his presidency. That was the beginning of the end, as Josiah from Pondering Politics, friend of the show, put it, of Biden's high approval rating. That's when it started to plummet. And it represents, again, the way here he's acknowledging the tragedy that came of that, but how he believes it was the correct decision given it had become a war that was just without a clear goal and indefinite, and was taking lives and was costing resources. And him talking about why he decided not to run, him discussing a painful, tragic, and profound decision that he made, representing something you could just never, and I want MAGA to think about this, you could never imagine Trump standing up on the world stage, exemplifying this type of character. And then this.
My fellow leaders, I truly believe we're at another inflection point in world history. For the choices we make today will determine our future for decades to come. Will we stand behind the principles that unite us? We stand firm against aggression. Will we end the conflicts that are raging today?
This on the subject of Ukraine, by the way.
We take on global challenges like climate change, hunger, and disease. Will we plan now for the opportunities and risk of a revolutionary new technologies? I want to talk today about each of these decisions and the actions, in my view, we must take. To start, each of us in this body has made a commitment to the principles of the UN Charter to stand up against aggression. When Russia invaded Ukraine, we could have stood by and merely protested. But Vice President Harris and I understood that that was an assault on everything this institution is supposed to stand for. And so, in my direction, America stepped into the breach, providing massive security and economic and humanitarian assistance. Our NATO allies and partners.
And walking through what we have before his record on Ukraine. There's so much from this, but let me just skip to his closing remarks.
From Ghana to India to South Korea, nations representing 1/4 of humanity who will hold elections this year alone. It's remarkable, the power of we the people, that makes me more optimistic about the future than I've ever been. Since I was first elected to the United States Senate in 1972, every age faces its challenges. I saw it as a young man. I see it today. but we are stronger than we think. We're stronger together than alone. And what the people call impossible is just an illusion. Nelson Mandela taught us, and I quote, "It always seems impossible until it's done. It always seems impossible until it's done." My fellow leaders, there is nothing that's beyond our capacity if we work together. Let's work together. God bless you all, and may God protect all those who seek peace. Thank you.
And there it is. Final speech in front of the UN General Assembly as the sitting president of the United States. And because this is a political show where we're covering the horse race, I do think it's a notable takeaway that what Biden's representing, the values on the world stage, the character, the principles, and even what is being represented by this being his last, for sure, as president, and him not seeking more time as president. All of that is a negative contrast for Trump. When you make that comparison, how Trump stood on the world stage, how world leaders thought of him and the decisions he made, and what character that exemplified versus Biden here, and I think Harris in many ways, as she steps into the role. It is a terrible contrast in how it portrays Trump. And Biden being at the UN did cause that UN Trump being laughed at speech to recirculate, which is not something that's going to make him happy. And I wish MAGA would consider, when you see Biden in some of these moments, why you could never consider Trump standing up and saying, it's time to pass the torch to the next generation. It's time for me, as a really polarizing, divisive figure, to get out of politics. That would be a unique characterization of Trump compared to Biden. And I'm going to put my country over myself. You can't imagine that. And that's horrible, and what it means about Trump. Let me know what you thought in the comments. Support the show by clicking that join button below.